Okay, so we're ready to move on, and I'm moving on to the nacelles. I'm going to start with the starboard side nacelle. You see how big this thing is. Look at my arm. Absolutely gorgeous. Take it out of the plastic. I will do it with one hand. Look at that. Look at all that beautiful plastic. You see where it's going to be lit on the inside. Yeah, this is going to be really nice. You can see the outside. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to wash it in hot soapy water. I'll do both halves, and then they'll be ready to prime. And I'll show you what that looks like when they're ready. So I washed them in hot soapy water, and they're nice and smooth, and they're not slippery or greasy anymore. All the release agent is off. So what I'm going to do now is I'll start to put on the pieces that go on. I'm not going to put on any of the clear parts yet. It's going to be primed and painted. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm not going to glue it together just yet. Once it's painted, I'll put the halves back together. I won't glue it, and then I'll do the Aztecing, the patterns. That way there I'll be able to take it apart and then put the panels in the clear plastic. So that's the plan. So let me go ahead and I'll put on some of the parts and show you what that looks like. Okay, so what I think I'm going to do, instead of doing everything separately like I did the secondary hull, and I kind of screwed it up, I think like when it comes to the fins, I'm going to put them together, and then I'm going to mask off where the lights are. That way there I can prime it all. And I'm probably going to use the Elmer's glue to mask off the lights. And you can see the fins go right there. And I'll drill a little hole in for where the lights will come out, because there's going to be a yellow light right here. Let me show you my plans for the nacelles, my wiring plan. There it is. You can see where the fin is, 1.8 millimeter yellow light. And in the fin there's going to be the white light that's going to come up and illuminate the NCC-1701. I'm not going to... I've seen people mask off the inside, and I don't know, it just doesn't look right to me. So I'm going to do like I did on the saucer pylon, and I'm going to have a light right here that's going to come up and illuminate it that way. And of course the strobe will be on top. Let me see, that's going to be going to the tenor controls board. That's LED 11. 2 of the 10 millimeter purples. And of course the large 5 millimeter blue on top. Then there's going to be the 2 1.8 millimeter white lights that are in the front of the nacelles. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it together. I'm going to mask off the light areas and get it ready to prime. Okay, so what I did was I gave it a priming coat of the black, to kind of light block everything. And when that's dry, I'm going to put the white, the bright white, on the inside. So I'll show you what this looks like when it's dry and it's ready for the next coat. Okay, so it had a chance to dry. And what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm going to give it another coat. Just to get it all the little nooks and crannies for the light blocking. I am going to paint the inside white, but I just want to make sure. So I'm going to give it another coat of the black. And when it's dry, I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so it had a chance to dry. And it's a little bit tacky, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it dry totally before I spray it with the white. So I just want to make sure that it stays and it's not, it doesn't end up flaking or anything. So probably going to end up just letting this dry really well before I put the white on. Alright, so I put the basic paint, the inside white. It's covering the black, and I'll put a couple of coats of these just so that there's no light block. So when this is all ready, we'll start doing the outside. Alright, so we got a couple of coats of the black, and we got a couple of coats of the white. So the inside is all set. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to sand it a little bit and get the lumps off, and then I'm going to prime the outsides. So the primer has had a chance to dry, and it's looking pretty good. The inside is done, and I think what I'm going to do now is it's ready for the finish coat. So I'll probably put a couple of coats of the finish coat on and be ready to start masking and doing the Aztecing. Okay, so while the main part of the nacelle dries, I'm going to prime and paint the smaller parts. I like the Bussard collector. Actually, this is the only Bussard collector on the Enterprises that the Enterprise models that don't light up. So I want to prime both sides, and this is going to be prime both sides in a good coat of paint because there's going to be a light that's going to go through, and there's going to be a light on the inside of the fin that's going to illuminate the NCC-1701 on the rear of the Bussard collector. So I'm going to prime these up on this side, and when that's done we'll do the other side and we'll be ready to put the finish coat on. So the fins are primed, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put them together, wire them, get them ready to put into the nacelle, and then I'll mask off the little areas, and it'll be ready to put the finish coat on when I put it on the nacelle. So I'm going to be using the micro lights, the micro LEDs, and this is a white one. This one is going to go on top to illuminate the NCC-1701, but I just ordered some yellow ones because, well, realistically the 1.8 millimeter, the smallest ones that I have of the yellow, let me show you. Let me get it on a camera. It's just not going to fit. I tried trimming it down, but it's just not going to work because it's too narrow in there. So I'm going to use the micro for both, and when that comes in, I'll put this all together. I'll putty the seam, and I'll get ready to attach it permanently to the nacelle, and then I'll paint it with the finish coat. And I'll show you what that looks like when I get the lights in. Alright, so I got the yellow micro LED in, and I got it soldered with the white. Now remember, this is going to light the NCC-1701 on the side of the nacelle, and this is going to be for the corner in the fin. And like I told you guys before, don't forget to put the resistors onto the positive side of the LEDs. Some of them will be red and black, and you can tell, or some of them will be longer. The positive side will be longer, but just remember, you got to put an LED on or you'll burn the bulb out. So these are all soldered at the base, and it's ready to install. What I'm going to do, and I'm going to paint the fin. I was thinking about just kind of putting them in, attaching the fin, and then masking off these little areas, but I don't want the masking putty or something to get stuck in those little holes. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this first, then I'm going to put it together, and then I'm going to try to putty in the cracks. And I'll show you what that looks like when that's finished. So it's all painted, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start applying the Aztecing decals. So I'm going to start with the inside of the starboard nacelle, and you can see this is the masking sheet, and I'll start at the very back, and you can see that these parts are what goes on the back section. And it's supposed to go halfway up where the fin is. So, and there's a couple of pieces that go on the top and in the front. So we'll start with these in the back and we'll work our way forward. So, giving you guys a little bit of a refresher, working with the orbital dry dock masks. First thing you got to do is you cut out the pieces, and then you pull the material around it so you outline it so you know where you're going to cut, and then you put the frisket over the top, and then you cut it as close to the edges as possible. Now we're ready to peel the backing off and apply it to the model. You can see where the groove is. That's going to go on the top of the nacelle as a guide. So I'm going to put all the masks on, and I'll show you what they look like when it's ready to be painted. Now remember, when you're peeling the backing off this, what I like to do is I like to just roll it with your thumb, keep it really low and sharp, keep the crease sharp, so as it goes off, anything that lifts up you can put down with tweezers. And you got to have a lot of patience, so I'll show you what it looks like when it's actually on the model. Alright, so I got the inner piece on. There's a little gap there, but that's okay. There's going to be one solid block that I'm going to put. And again, this is really tedious. So let me put the last piece on for the back side, and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, so the back side is all covered up. And remember, you're going to have a lot of patience with this. Sometimes it tends to stick where you don't want it to stick, and not to stick where you want it to stick. But I'm going to move on to the middle section, and I'll show you what that looks like when it's done. Alright, so I got the top part on. You can see the back is on. See, they have a hard time sticking. So I think what I was planning on masking the whole thing off and doing it that way. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to mask this section off and do the painting for this half. And then when that's done, I'll mask that off, and then I'll do the front and the bottom, because they're just not sticking on. So, we're getting ready to paint. So I took off some of the pieces, and what I like to do is I'll put them on a piece of wax paper, and then I'll mark them, so when I put them back, I'll see the ones that already are painted, so the sections don't need to be done. So what I'm going to do is I like the Inspire, and I'm going to use the Pearl Blue, and I'm going to start with the blue. I'm going to use the air gun, and I'll show you what it looks like after it's done. So what I like to do is I like to mark off the pieces, and when I put them back on, it makes me know that the section is done. And again, I don't know if it's because I'm doing it wrong, but they just don't seem to be sticking. I don't know if it's because of the Rustolium paint, but it seems like they just don't want to hang on. I hope this doesn't affect the overall paint job. You can see trying to get them to stick it's impossible. It just doesn't want to stick, so I might have to change some sections and alter the painting scheme, at least for that part. Hopefully these will stick a little bit better, just enough to get it painted. So I'm going to move on to the next one, and I think what I'm going to do now is we'll do the gold. So I'm going to remove the pieces where I'm going to paint it red. I'm sorry, did I say gold? I meant red. And I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, I can't stress enough on how frustrating this is, where they just won't stick. The things you don't want them to stick to, they stick, and when you need them to stick, they just won't stick. I'm going to try to carefully peel off the next batch, and I think what I'm going to do next time is, let's see, we're going to do the red. So the red will be next, and I'm going to take off the sections, and I'll show you what that looks like when it's done. Okay, so I just sprayed the green, and because they're not sticking, it would blow, the paint gun would blow off some of the other stickers. So I'm going to put those back on. But the green is done, and what I'm going to do now is, the last color will be the gold. And I'll put the pieces back on when this is dry, and then I'll take off the pieces for the gold, and the gold will be the final color. So what I'm going to do now is, because they're acting, well, they're got a mind of their own, and it's hard to keep them on, I got the last color that I'm going to do, which is the gold, and I'm actually going to tape the ones down to try to keep them in place, and I'm going to remove the ones that I'm going to paint, and I'll show you what that looks like when it's ready to go. Alright, so the moment of truth, I'm going to take this off, and I already took all the small pieces off from this part. Can't really tell that much. So let's take all these off, and I'll show you what this looks like. So I took off the masking tape and the small pieces. You can't really see it too much on this small section. You can see it a little bit more when you go to the back. That kind of like a brick pattern. And it's this effect that makes well, let's face it, it's a pain to go through all this, but the end result is pretty nice. It does look nice. So this section is all set. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do this section. I'm going to mask off that section, and we'll do the front. And then we'll do the Aztecing. So this is all set to apply the masks. Alright, so we're ready to start doing the front part of this half. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cut the pieces and get them ready to transfer onto the nacelle. Okay, so I cut the pieces out, and then I put the film, or the frisket, over them, because we're going to, remember, peel the backs off. So I've been reusing this piece, and let's see, we got 4 pieces that are going to go on the front, and I'll cut these out, and I'll take the backs off, and I'll show you how that looks. All right, the pieces are cut out. I'm all set on where they need to go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn them over, and I'm going to remove the backing, and then they'll be ready to apply to the nacelle, and I'll show you what it looks like when the backing is off and the first one is in position. Alright, so I got the first piece on, and this stuff is very delicate and it takes a lot of patience, at least with me anyway. I'd like to think I'm getting better at it so that when I get to the saucer section I'm doing it as good as they do on their website, but it's still very hard for me. So I got the first piece on, and we'll move on to the second piece. I think it's important to note that since I'm doing the halves instead of it together, this piece that goes on the bottom, I cut it in half. That way there, I can put it on the bottom, and I'll connect the 2 halves later. I'm going to have to connect the 2 halves when I do the top section, but for now, I'm going to just do the bottom. So I cut that in half, just so you guys know why it looks different than what the instructions call for, but I ended up cutting that in half. So I'm going to put this one on, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's on. Alright, so I got the second part on, and it's a little off, but you don't want to be moving them around, pulling them off and reattaching them more than you have to, because they really won't stick. It's hard to get them to stick now, but when you're going to take them off and put them back on, it's just going to lose that much more each time you do that for the adhesive. So this is, I'm going to be happy with living with this for now. And I'm going to move on to the next section, and I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so we got that section on. Again, I don't know if it's because of the paint that I'm using, the Rustolium, but it really does not want to stick to the model. I've got to keep it attached as best as I can, and now we can go ahead and we can put the final piece up on top. Alright, so they're kind of in place. So I'm going to hope and pray that they just stay adhesive back long enough so I can get the section painted. So now we're ready to start painting, and like last section, we're going to take off pieces and we're going to mark them and we're going to put a color on. So I'm going to take off a few pieces and we'll start with the first color. We'll probably start with, let's see, red. Alright, so I put the paint on. We got the red layer. And we'll let that dry. And when that's good and dry, we'll put all of the marked panels or pieces back on, and we'll move on to the next color. Alright, so I put the pieces back on that are marked. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take off some more. And let's see, what's the next color? We'll do blue. So I'll show you what it looks like when it's ready to be painted. Alright, I got the parts gone that I want to put blue, and I marked them. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the blue, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's all painted. Alright, so I got the pieces that I marked back on, and you can see they're all curling up, and they're just not sticking. This is a real pain. I don't know what else to do. Is I'm going to try to tape some of the pieces that are already marked down and tape them down so they actually stay. But I'm going to take off the section. The next one I'll do is I'll do the green. And I'll take off the pieces and I'll mark them and I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so I painted the green, and while I was painting, the airbrush were blowing the pieces off that are all curled and they won't stick, and well, this is pretty much a real pain. And I got one color left to go, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to tape down all the others just to keep them in place so I can put the final color. The final color is going to be the gold. So I'll show you what that looks like when the pieces are off and it's ready to be painted. Alright, so I try to get the pieces on after I put the green. So what I'm going to try to do now is the pieces that aren't marked, I'm going to take off, and that's going to be the gold. And I'm going to try to tape all the others that are marked in place so the gold doesn't spill onto the other colors. Well, alright, here's the moment of truth. Let's take the rest of the things off and we'll see how it looks. Alright, so I took off the pieces. Try to get it where you can see. Remember, the Aztecing isn't so much to like really stick out and look very, very bold. It's to look like, well, like when you look at the ship and it hits a certain light and it kind of twinkles like that, like a pearl. And there are some videos on YouTube that just makes the Aztecing look incredible. I'm not talented enough to do that, but this is what I did, and trying to get those pieces to stay on for me was hard. So I'll show you down the other end. It is beautiful. It is a, well, the Enterprise is sparkles like a jewel. So with this section is all done. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the other half. Because when the other half is done, then we'll do the top. But we got to get the halves finished first.